Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Luella Fernandez, Director of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Chris Marshall, European Director of Business Printing and Solutions. Today we'll be discussing SMB transformation opportunities and automation. So great to have you here today, Chris. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for the invite, Luella.
So maybe we could start off if you could tell us a bit about your career and your role at Brother today.
Yeah, today, as you introduced me, I'm director responsible for our business printing and solutions, which really is our SMB and enterprise business within Europe. I've been with Brother around 17 years. I started as product manager in Brother Europe and today have a broader commercial role responsible for the whole of Europe. Prior to joining Brother, I held a number of marketing positions in different industries. And overall, my role in Brother is I lead the team. We support our channel partners, local officers, and our larger enterprise end customers.
Yeah, so I just wanted to really ask about the impact of the pandemic on Brother's business and strategy. Clearly, it's been a very sort of challenging year for the print industry. So how has Brother changed and adapted with respect to its products and service offerings?
Short term, we saw some big changes in demand due to COVID impact when the initial lockdowns happened. There was initially almost a panic buying of working from home devices with everybody scrambling to enable people to work in home offices. And in parallel, there was this slowdown in project rollout as organisations weren't in the offices. But that recovered as lockdown eased. We also saw some opportunities in other parts of our business as things like in retail and hospitality, click and collect drove demand for labelling solutions. Today, I think like most companies, not just in our industry, but in many others, we're actually balancing the challenge of strong demand with difficulties in global supply chains. Parts availability, manufacturing and logistics are all headaches for everybody today. And we very much are relying on our Brother philosophy of at your side with our partners to try and help them, give them the best communication we can to help them through that now. What we do see is that panic buying working from home demand is now starting to change a little bit. And companies are starting to think, how do I actually manage all these devices that my staff have got in their home office? Probably as the bills for consumables are coming in, being bought on Amazon and things like that, it's starting to make people realize that actually we need to think again about, whereas in the past we thought about the fleet of printers in our office very carefully, we're now starting to get requests from customers about how do I apply that same thinking to the home office environment.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you talk about the panic buying, and that's definitely what we've seen in terms of this shadow purchasing of devices that, perhaps IT haven't been able to control, and now they're looking at how they can extend their MPS contracts into that home environment. So I know Brother's very focused on SMBs, and you mentioned about how you're supporting channel partners. Can you talk a bit about how you define SMBs firstly, and how you're seeing their needs are different to those in larger organizations?
Like many people in many industries, we use the classic segmentation for SMBs of organisations up to 1,000 employees. But with such an SMB focus in our business, we do find that some further segmentation is really helpful. So typically we talk in terms of SMB plus for organisations of 250 employees and above, and SMB minus for organisations between about 10 and 50 employees. As far as we see differences in those SMB, we do see that in some cases SMBs are a lot more flexible than enterprises. A big ship takes a long time to steer. And so we see quite a big variation in behaviour across the organisations we support. Some officers are really adopting hybrid work. Some organisations are adopting hybrid working really thoroughly. Some are almost even giving up on having central offices. Whereas Others, actually, in some countries particularly, we see that many office workers are back 5 days a week. So particularly, it seems to be Southern Europe is very much wanting to return to the office, with places like Northern Europe, Scandinavia, actually seeing the home working as quite a successful initiative. And I think everyone is going to kind of spend some time finding the balance between that. What we do see is that obviously bigger organizations have far more complexity. But even for a smaller organization, they still find it difficult to manage fleets, even if you've only got 30 employees working from home in a small organization. Actually, that's in some ways more of a challenge because you cannot bring in bespoke software, etc., things like that. And even for the smallest organizations, people want to be able to print from a mobile phone whenever they want to at home. And as a print provider, it's up to us to enable them to do that both efficiently and securely. Yeah. And certainly, I think delivering that print solution for home workers is quite complex. And we think many smaller businesses will choose that option of buying transactionally and just let employees print. Whereas definitely larger organizations are now investigating those kind of full managed print offerings we mentioned before, making sure that security, device management, supplies replenishment are all considered as part of that working from home strategy. And I think many of the print management software providers are now scrambling to try and understand what is the best working from home solution. And particularly those with good cloud solutions seem to be the ones in the leading edge. But an interesting wrinkle in that whole story is that typically devices that are compatible with those device management and print management solutions tend to be higher end devices, not lower end, suitable for working from home. So there's still some work for us to do as a print vendor and other print vendors, along with the software industry, to try and really meet the needs of this new opportunity that's out there and demand from customers.
Yeah, I think it's what we've seen as well is that SMBs have been quite resilient over the past year, and they've managed to adapt quite quickly in terms of their general productivity, and print has really helped them in that way. And it's interesting to hear that Brother is focusing on helping SMBs and their particular print needs, and it's very different to large enterprises who may already have broader MPS agreements in place that are sort of looking at security and managing those via the cloud. So I wanted to move on to understand a bit more about sort of Brother's strategy around the office and distributed printing. Clearly Brother's got a real focus on the A4 hardware kind of centric approach. And we've seen with MPS now, it's almost gone full circle, and organizations are looking to, again, re-optimize their fleet and actually understand more about how their employees are printing in this sort of distributed infrastructure. So could you maybe talk a bit about Brother's strategy on the distributed print side?
As we've never really had those centralized devices, we've always been focused on distributed print solutions, whether it's been regional offices, retail back office, or specific vertical requirements in healthcare area or something like that. We've always been more aimed around a balanced deployment kind of print solution where print is provided locally to the user as opposed to a more centralized one. So actually, we think we're in a very nice position as far as supporting these new emerging requirements are concerned. And that applies not just to A4 print, but also to desktop scanning and other imaging requirements in the organization. We definitely are focused on being able to manage a large number of locations with our solutions. So we created our MPS solution, for example, to be able to manage many distributed environments, because typically we, as a desktop and workgroup provider, we actually have less printers in more locations than some of our competitors. And so being able to manage those efficiently is actually really important to us. So I'll give you an example where in one of our clients, we actually have printers under contract in over 7,000 different locations, all managed as part of one contract. And I do believe that's quite unusual in the industry for someone to not just be capable, but also comfortable and happy to be in a position to manage that kind of rollout.
Would that be all Brother devices that you're managing?
Brothers, where we require to manage devices other than Brother, we always work closely with our channel partners. So Brother will provide the A4 Brother solution and work alongside channel partner for that engagement to make sure that if there are A3 needs, if there are customer needs not met by the Brother part of the solution, we've got systems that allow the channel partner to actually create one window to the end user, but actually the back office management and everything is still maintained and we help out. So almost like a white label solution in the case where it's needed. But in those 7,000 locations, they're all Brother devices.
Okay. So really that's interesting because I think often the perception with Brother, because it's very channel focused and focused on the SMB, that you wouldn't have those large types of contracts and be managing all those devices actively. So would you say that there are sort of different requirements from your customers to be able to manage that via the cloud and to have security capabilities as well with your MPS contracts?
Yeah, I mean, security obviously has been a big priority for all our customers for a number of years now. And credit due to HP for raising that in the customer's eye, definitely in the level of importance. So security is obviously fundamental and a key part of any MPS offering. Obviously, to manage all those individual locations, things like cloud solutions are absolutely vital. And our own MPS platform is built around a cloud communication network. So with our devices directly communicating to the cloud. So no need for any software installation locally for data collection or anything like that.
Yeah, so I guess that makes it more effective for the customer and for the channel in terms of how they can manage that environment. So that leads quite nicely on to the next question, which is really around how Brother is supporting its channel partners move beyond MPS to value-led solutions, because I guess MPS has become not such a commodity, but it's very a mature market now, and there's a real need for channel partners to advance their capabilities. So how is Brother supporting its channel partners on that journey?
Obviously, we are a 100% channel organisation. Every piece of business we do, even when it's on one of our own MPS platforms, is all arranged and delivered through one of our channel partners. So we've obviously built all of our systems around that model and make sure, as I said before, even to the point where a partner of ours can almost white label a service to the customer. In the front, it looks like actually it's the channel partner that's making the offering and doing all the work. But actually at the back end, it's the Brother systems and the Brother processors and Brother logistics that are delivering them the service and solution that they need. And we've really kind of built our offering around enabling even someone who has never sold print or never been interested in selling print in the past to make that transition into offering print as that part of their portfolio.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I know you mentioned that client where you're supporting over 7,000 individual locations, and you mentioned about the smaller devices where you're maybe just supporting less than 5 devices. So can you talk a bit about how you reach those kind of customers and through your channel partners?
Yeah, it really is through a long-term partnership with our loyal channel partners. We've been on a similar journey to many of those channel partners themselves. So for many of typical Brother smaller dealers, when we first started with our managed print offering, actually the first NPS contract some of our dealers ever sold was the first contract we ever sold with them. Yeah, and so, as I say, we've been able to go on that journey with many of our existing partners and take them through a learning process. But equally, we also work very closely with large IT enterprise providers, etc., for our larger customer needs. We do, in addition, as well, for biggest engagements, we have a what we call our end user team, who directly engage with bigger customers, still always in partnership with a partner, but actually where we have a voice to understand the end customer's needs, make sure we have exactly the right solution to deliver, no matter what the scale of the opportunity.
So are you seeing any particular types of channel partners that are really leading in that opportunities, where they're sort of really expanding their NPS capabilities? Does it vary by region or types of partners?
It's hard to be too specific about types of partners. Obviously, NPS historically was very strong in the copier channel, although in many cases, some copier partners can be a bit slow to want to adopt NPS for A4, either because of hassle, risk. It's not their area of expertise. Yeah. So we do work with a number of those. And again, being able to hand all that off to Brother is really helpful. What I would say is, particularly for those that are expanding their NPS business, a lot of it comes down to those who can see how important it is to have a full service model for their customers. And particularly, I think some of the IT service providers are seeing that they actually don't want a competitor in any form in their end customer, if at all possible. Because obviously that's a risk to their business. Because in the medium term, I think we all see that probably the kind of copier channel and the IT service channel are going to converge. Copier partners over the years have been adding more and more IT functionality, and IT service partners are also wanting to increase share of wallet and wanting to add more print in there, even though maybe a few years ago in transactional world, they actually stopped selling print because they saw it as a lot of hassle and they didn't get the supplies benefit. In a contractual world, they're also able to see some benefit from the supplies business too. So we see kind of it's really down to the desire to change, to me, that highlights whether someone will be successful or not with the move to managed print.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point you make about the convergence between NPS and IT services, because I think there are opportunities on both sides to have, joint offerings. But, I think it's an interesting point you say about IT service providers wanting to own the whole of that contract from an IT and a print perspective. And, that certainly wasn't the case a few years ago. But it's also driven by customer demand as well for having a single supplier to cover the whole infrastructure. So could you touch a bit upon any regional variations? I know you're sort of responsible for all of Europe. Can you talk a bit about any particular regions that are perhaps at the forefront of hybrid working and perhaps, seeing more changes in terms of their print requirements, and also any particular verticals that Brother's seeing success in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm based in the UK, and we see the UK is definitely, you only need to look on the news to understand how hybrid working is changing here. And in the UK, it definitely does seem to be a true hybrid model that's being adopted. So there will still be print in the office. There will also be print at home. What we also see is, are people starting to use kind of different office models? So more regional offices, less central offices will come. People are talking about it now. We've not yet seen how that will play out exactly. So here, I think, is almost the classic centre case of hybrid in the UK. If we look at a region like the Nordics, actually, we almost seem to be hearing stories of office companies who are saying, well, I don't need an office anymore. Everyone can be home-based. If we need to meet, we'll meet at a meeting room somewhere or a coffee shop or wherever is the appropriate place, or a hotel. They don't believe that for them, working, collaborative working can be done in different environments. It doesn't need to take place in the existing office facilities. Whereas, again, I think I mentioned earlier, in Southern Europe, we see people seem to want to go back to a more conventional office routine. So we see more of our customers are back there full time. And that kind of has some interesting variation in terms of office print volume recoveries and things like that, as we do see some different patterns around different geographies right now.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because, like you say, that whole return to the office is really what's going to boost print volumes in the office environment. And I think although home working is here to stay, it's the print volumes are never going to be enough to compensate, obviously, for the office environment. So it's interesting to hear about those regional variations. And in terms of sector, are you seeing, particular different approaches in, healthcare, retail, and so on? And, how are you expecting that to play out over the next year?
So obviously, one big area for Brother is public sector. And actually, that's one area where demand has been pretty stable. So I mentioned before about project rollout slowing down and stopping. Ironically, in some public sector environments, it just carried on. So obviously a lot of those offices were still had people going in because they were seen as an essential public service. So public sector demand has definitely remained quite stable. Another key area for us is retail, and particularly retail back office. There, we definitely saw some kind of slow down around COVID as a lot of retail organisations were closed. In practice, what that really meant was a lot of contract extensions and things like that, rather than seeking new hardware at the time, because the future was very uncertain at that point. But I think in the end, most retail organisations have come out of it probably far better than they feared when they went into it. And we're definitely now starting to see a recovery in those opportunities that we're discussing with those customers. Healthcare was a bit of a funny one because the demand was there very clearly in some cases. So, we even saw some increased demand around solutions for vaccination or emergency medical facilities and things like that, albeit there was always a kind of a level. That was definitely one area where no one wanted to go prospecting around the time of COVID, because obviously everyone was incredibly busy doing, honestly, far more important work than worrying about printers. But again, that has now kind of settled down and demand seems primarily back to normal. Obviously within healthcare, I think that's an area where there's been a lot of digitalisation, and certainly the COVID trend has kind of affected things like prescription printing, not just in the UK, where we've probably all gone digital with that now, but also in a lot of other regions as well. Similar things have happened.
Yeah, so you touched on digitization there, and I know Brother's got a scanner business as well. Have you seen, just out of interest, any increase in the use of scanning, because even home workers are scanning more rather than printing? And how do you think that's going to change over the next year in terms of Brother's focus? Yeah,
well, we've seen the impact of digitization for a long time now. Certainly the last 17 years I've been in the industry. Now, we've seen that demand actually for MFC devices has grown massively. And 15, 16 years ago, the majority of those MFCs were definitely sold as a replacement for a fax machine. But today, we see the number one use outside of print is scanning documents. So creating those digital workflows and storage requirements, etc. So, and if you look at how much MFPs have grown relative to single function printers in the market over the past years, it's very, very clear that that has now become, digitization has been driving our industry for quite some time. And we should also recognize, though, as a print provider, that digitization is causing PVs to decline. Yeah, there's no question. Paper processes are being replaced by digital ones. But I think the important thing is the print that remains is actually very important print, and people are focusing on, we want people to use print where it adds value to their process. Yeah, where they do a better job by having access to a printer.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's about printing, I guess, eliminating wasteful printing, but there's still a demand for the high value printing. So in your view, and I know we touched on it a bit in terms of the verticals and the regions, but do you see that print volumes will bounce back to pre-COVID levels, or do you feel that that's, I know print volumes have always been flat to declining, but do you see any pockets of opportunities in certain areas?
So I think we still aren't back to where it can get back to, because if you look at lockdowns still being sporadic, and I talked about the UK and hybrid working, but there's still a lot of UK organisations where people have not gone back in the office yet, but still intend to at least 2 or 3 days a week. So I think office print volumes will recover a little bit further than where they are today. I don't see them going back to pre-COVID print volume levels on a general basis. But vertical by vertical, different processes, probably some are more suitable for digitalisation and removal of that print than others. So particularly things like retail back office and those areas, we haven't seen any real decline in those areas. One opportunity we could see as an A4 provider, that is, if the demand for print, overall print volume comes down, actually there may be less need for large centralized A3 devices in the future, in which case actually that print volume could transfer to more decentralized A4 devices. And so on A4, there could be an increase in print volume overall, even if total office print declined, because a lot of that print today is currently done on those large centralized devices.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming year in terms of organizations reassessing their printer fleets and replacing A3 devices with more print devices. So whilst, potentially they could have more devices, and that print would be spread across a higher number of devices. And I think that's also interesting from a sustainability perspective, because obviously with more devices, there's potentially increased energy costs as well. So, I'm just curious as to what Brothers' position is around sustainability. I know it has quite a strong focus at a corporate level, but maybe you could share some insight into your propositions around sustainability.
So as a company, we're very much focused on operating as ethically and sustainable as we can. Yeah. And at a corporate level, we've selected 9 out of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Those that we can impact them as part of our business and have a clear plan being prepared on how do we work towards improving in all of those areas. Obviously, as a manufacturer, some key area of our sustainable operations is the performance of our products, but also the environmental and community aspects of how we produce those products in our facilities. But then also, what is the sustainability of the business model we operate as well? And one area that we focused on, I think probably quite quietly over past years, but we've been doing it now for a long time, is the circular economy model around our supplies business. So in order to reduce CO2 and waste plastic, we've actually been remanufacturing our own supplies to as new standard and supply them back again into the market as a new, fully warranted, 100% perfect consumable. We've now reached the point, it's around 1.5 million cartridges a year in Europe that we're actually remanufacturing. And I'm really proud to say that we're actually able to reuse about 90% of the components in a cartridge at least once is able to be reused. So we do believe that's a very important part of reducing that environmental impact. In terms of kind of going back to the initial comment you made about many devices replacing one device, obviously, I think that's a case of balance. And at some point, you're quite right, replacing one central device with 10 smaller devices may not deliver an energy balance that's better, or a product balance that's better. But there's a sweet spot somewhere in there where we can deliver a solution that's both more sustainable as well as more convenient for the customer, I believe.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to hear what your strategy is around the remanufacturing, reuse of cartridges, because I think that, like you say, it's probably not that well known, but I think we're seeing now that businesses are becoming more conscious about their environmental impact, with the focus on climate change as well. And, I think sustainability is definitely moving higher on the agenda. So I think for any print manufacturers, they need to have a good story, and good, not just a story, but, sort of, real kind of actions around what they're doing around that whole kind of cradle to almost cradle approach for their devices.
Yeah, you will definitely hear more around circular economy initiatives from us in the future.
So that's been really interesting to hear, what Brother's doing, particularly with respect to SMBs and how MPS is extending into the home workplace as well. So in terms of predictions for 2022. So I'm asking all guests to maybe share any insights or trends that they see as an opportunity for the industry over the next year. So maybe you could, maybe share anything that Brother is focusing on in 2022 and any key trends that you think would be priorities for the next year.
So I think I see three clear trends. One is one that's been there for the last few years, and we mentioned it before, and that's security. It isn't going to go away. If anything, the number of cyber attacks being made out there is increasing all the time. And so security is going to be still a very, very high priority for all our customers. What will probably be the next step is expecting that same level of enterprise security on smaller devices that are used in working from home as an extended part of that corporate network. And around also probably the software solutions and tools that their home users are using as well to maintain that security infrastructure. One that will be, I think, something of a change is what we were just talking about with sustainability. For a long time, sustainability has been there as something that people talked about, but it was never the key buying criteria for a customer. Very rare to find a customer who bought on sustainability first and other factors second. And I definitely see that it is increasing in terms of its importance in the buying criteria. So if we look at different levels, different countries, we already see in a number of countries where public procurement is starting to insist on a certain percentage of hardware having had some recycled content, a certain percentage of supplies being supplied to them being remanufactured, as I talked before. So definitely I see sustainability isn't going to go away. I don't believe that's just due to the fact that we're recording this right at the end of COP26. I do genuinely believe we are going to see some significant changes in that area. And then I think one other area that we'll see, and probably strongly driven by ourselves and other manufacturers, will be bringing the benefits of contractual solutions like MPS down into the smaller market. Some more and more initiatives to give that same kind of convenience and ease of having print into smaller customers.
Yeah, no, I think they're great predictions. I think, security, sustainability and subscriptions, particularly subscriptions are, pretty much prevalent now in the consumer space, and that's bleeding into the business environment. And I think that's a real opportunity for for print manufacturers to really, improve their propositions around MPS, but very basic MPS offerings for the home office environment as well. So, I really appreciate you sharing those with me. So, it's been really interesting to hear what Brother's doing in the SMB space and, its focus around sustainability. That was really interesting, but also understanding how it's extending its MPS value propositions to the channel. So thanks very much for joining me again today, Chris. It's been really interesting.
Thank you very much for the chance to talk, Luella.
So thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please visit quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.